Brian, if we could actually, we're going to get started. Hello. Let's see. All right. Is the mic? Can you hear? Is the mic live, Brian? Can you hear me? Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right, we're going to get started. Welcome to this public hearing of the New York City Rent Guidelines Board. This is the second of 4 public hearings to consider comments on proposed rent adjustments for leases for apartments, lofts, hotels, and other housing units subject to the Rent Stabilization Law of 1969 and the Emergency Tenant Protection Act of 1974. These adjustments will affect leases commencing between October 1st, 2023 and September 30th, 2024. I will now take roll call. Please respond if present. Doug Apple?
Present.
Hennesis Aquino? Christina DeRose?
Present.
Rob Ehrlich?
Present.
Arpit Gupta? Alex Schwartz? Christina Smith? Adon Soltren? And Nestor Davidson, I'm present. Let the record show that we have a quorum. Our next 2 meetings will be public hearings to comment on the proposed guidelines as we are hearing tonight. They will be held at the following dates and times. Tomorrow night, June 13th, will be a virtual public hearing. And then this Thursday, June 15th, will be at St. Francis College at 179 Livingston Street in Brooklyn. All our public hearings are scheduled from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Anyone who wants to comment on the proposed rule that a public hearing must sign up to speak. People wishing to speak at the public hearings can pre-register in advance. You can pre-register online through our website, nyc.gov/RGB. Or you can sign up to speak by calling 212-669-7480 from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. Pre-registration ends at noon on the business day prior to each hearing. For those who did not pre-register for tonight, and for Thursday night's in-person hearings, registration is also available at the hearings from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. All of our public hearings are live streamed and Spanish interpretation will be provided. Other translation is available upon request. We will also be taking comments on the proposed guidelines outside of our public hearings. If you are unable to attend our hearings, you can submit written, audio, and video comments prior to the hearings for the board members' review through this Thursday, June 15th. Instructions to submit these comments will be available on the board's website at, again, nyc.gov/RGB or by email at ask@rgb.nyc.gov or again by calling the RGB at 212-669-7480. Before we proceed with this evening's testimony, I'd like to go over our rules and procedures for testifying before the board. If you wish to speak, please confirm your presence with the RGB staff at the registration table located near the entrance of the hall. Speakers will not be called on if they have not checked in at the registration table. There are Spanish interpreters here today. When registering to speak, please notify the staff if you would like an interpreter. I will try to call several names in advance in order to let you know that you will soon be called on to speak. I'd really appreciate it if you could come. Thank you, Hennesis. If you could come to the mic when we call you, just so that we can keep the evening moving. It would really help us hear from everyone. If you have materials to distribute to the board, please give them to the RGB staff sitting at the sign-in table near the entrance. Our tradition is to alternate speakers between tenants and owners, and I'll do so as much as we can. In order to accommodate as many speakers as possible, each speaker will have 2 minutes to give their testimony, with an additional 2 minutes of speaking time to those speakers utilizing interpretation services. To help speakers keep track of their time, we have a clock, which we will start when you begin speaking. The clock will beep once a speaker has 30 seconds left, and will continue beeping when the allotted 2 minutes are completed. If you are still speaking at the end of 2 minutes, I will ask you to wrap up your testimony so that we again can hear everyone. We expect a number of speakers tonight, and the board really wants to hear from as many speakers as possible in the limited time we have. We understand that it can be difficult to say everything you want us to hear in just 2 minutes, but please understand our responsibility to make sure that everyone who has taken the time to come here will have a fair opportunity to be heard. Really very much appreciate your cooperation, and the board is looking forward to hearing from you regarding the proposed rent adjustment guidelines. Andrew, do we have our first 3 speakers?
Buenas noches a todos. Me gustaría darles la bienvenida a esta audiencia pública de la Junta de Normas y Alquileres de la Ciudad de Nueva York. Esta es la segunda de 4 audiencias públicas para considerar sus comentarios relativos a los ajustes de alquiler propuestos para los contratos de alquiler de apartamentos, lofts o altillos, hoteles y otras unidades de vivienda sujetas a la Ley de Estabilización de Alquileres de 1969 y la Ley de Protección de Inquilinos de Emergencia de 1974. Estos ajustes afectarán a las renovaciones de los contratos de alquiler que empiecen entre el 1 de octubre de 2023 y el 30 de septiembre de 2024. Ahora pasaré lista. Por favor, respondan si están presentes. Doug Apple, presente. Genesis Aquino, presente. Christina DeRose, presente. Robert Ehrlich, presente. Arpit Gupta, no presente. Alex Schwartz, presente. Christina Smith, presente. Adam Soltran, no presente. Nestor Davidson, presente. Que conste en acta, por favor, que contamos con un quórum para esta noche. Las 2 próximas reuniones de esta Junta serán audiencias públicas para comentar sobre las normas propuestas y estas se celebrarán en las fechas y horas siguientes. El 13 de junio será una audiencia pública virtual de 5 a 8 de la noche, o sea, mañana, y el 15 de junio será en persona en la Universidad de St. Francis, ubicada en el 179 de la calle Livingston en Brooklyn, de 5 a 8 de la noche. Todo aquel que desee comentar sobre las normas propuestas en una audiencia pública deberá inscribirse para poder declarar. Las personas que deseen declarar en las audiencias públicas pueden inscribirse por adelantado. Podrán preinscribirse en línea a través de nuestra página web nyc.gov/RGB o simplemente puede inscribirse al llamar al 212-669-7480 de 9 a 5 de la tarde de lunes a viernes. Esta preinscripción finalizará al mediodía del día laborable anterior a cada audiencia. Tenga en cuenta, por favor, que para poder declarar en la audiencia virtual del 13 de junio es necesario inscribirse previamente. Quienes no se inscriban por adelantado para las audiencias de hoy y el jueves podrán inscribirse de 5 a 8 de la noche. Todas las audiencias públicas se transmitirán en directo. Y claro, habrá interpretación al español en cada audiencia. También recibiremos comentarios sobre las normas propuestas fuera de nuestras audiencias públicas. Si usted no puede asistir a nuestras audiencias, puede presentar comentarios por escrito, por audio o por video antes de las audiencias para que los miembros de la Junta los revisen hasta el 15 de junio. Las instrucciones para presentar estos comentarios estarán disponibles en el sitio web de la Junta, nuevamente en nyc.gov/RGB, por correo electrónico a ask@rgb.nyc.gov o al llamar a la RGB al 212-669-7480. Me gustaría darles las gracias a todos por asistir a esta audiencia pública. La Junta desea escuchar a muchos de ustedes en relación con las normas propuestas sobre el ajuste de alquiler. Antes de continuar con sus testimonios, me gustaría repasar las normas y procedimientos para quienes declaren ante la Junta esta noche. Si desean declarar, deberán confirmar su presencia con el personal de la RGB en la mesa de inscripción situada cerca de la entrada de este salón. No se llamarán a aquellos que no se hayan inscrito con el personal de la mesa de inscripción. Tendremos, claro, intérpretes de español y cuando se inscriban para hablar, notifíquenle por favor al personal si desean intérprete esta noche. Intentaré pronunciar varios nombres con antelación para que sepan qué pronto se les llamará para declarar. Si tienen material de distribuirle a la Junta, deben entregárselo al personal de la RGB que se encuentra en la mesa de inscripción cerca de la entrada. Intentaré alternar los hablantes entre inquilinos y propietarios, pero no siempre será posible hacer esto. Para dar cabida al mayor número posible de hablantes, cada hablante dispondrá de 2 minutos para declarar. Claro, se concederán 2 minutos adicionales a los hablantes que utilicen servicios de interpretación y para ayudar a los hablantes a controlar su tiempo, dispondremos de un temporizador que ustedes verán justo ahí en el escenario. Lo pondremos en marcha una vez que el hablante empiece a declarar. El temporizador sonará una vez que a los hablantes les queden 30 segundos y este seguirá sonando cuando se hayan agotado los 2 minutos asignados. Si los hablantes siguen hablando después de los 2 minutos, les pediré que concluyan rápidamente su declaración. Esperamos que declaren muchos entre ustedes y la Junta desea escuchar al mayor número posible de hablantes en el tiempo limitado del que disponemos para esta audiencia. Entendemos que puede ser difícil decir todo lo que quieran que oigamos en apenas 2 minutos, pero por favor, entiendan que es nuestra responsabilidad asegurarnos de que todos los que se hayan tomado el tiempo de venir acá esta noche declaren y tengan la oportunidad de que se les escuche. Les agradecemos su colaboración.
Thank you so much. Let me announce our first 3 speakers, and if you could be prepared to come share your testimony with us. We'll hear first from Jacob Schrader, then William Botchway, and then Alex Jacobs. Thank you. Is the mic on?
Good
Thank
evening. I'm Jacob Schrader. I'm a landlord. First thing I'm going to tell you is I have nothing to complain about. I'm doing great. I have a phenomenal cash flow. So instead of talking about me and my troubles, which are none, I'm going to talk about the tenants and the future. First, let's discuss why I'm doing great. Fortunately, my building is in an area where there is a very high turnover. And by having a lot of vacancy increases and a great deal of money that I would reinvest into the building, I have a very substantial rent roll. It's about $180,000 a year. What I did do, though, is calculate where my rents would be if we were living under the laws of 2019, 40 years ago when I went into this business. And my rent roll would be under $75,000. Considering it costs about $50,000 a year just to run the building on basics, that would leave me with a $20,000 margin. Extremely dangerous for the building and the tenants. Why? Because when a major capital improvement is necessary, you have to go to a bank to get the money to do it. And no bank would lend me money on my building with a $20,000 profit margin, which was only $20,000 if all my tenants are paying rent. Consequently, with the rent increases we are getting now, which we can't subsidize with vacancies, all of us with rent-stabilized buildings, will be headed for the same picture in 30 years, which is the brink of disaster. What does that mean? We'll lose our buildings. And these people will have to be living in a crumbling mess of rats, leaks, and basically worn-out systems. It's not good for anybody. And many of them will fall into the hands of the same kind of criminal that operated in the South Bronx, and they will come with their cans of gasoline and their matches.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you. William Botchway? Thank you.
I'm William Bochway. My family has only ever lived in 2 places, Ghana and Flushing, Queens. My grandparents came to this country and settled in the neighborhood in 1971, where they still live today. Went off to college, spent 5 years away from the city, but I found myself right back in Queens, where I belong. But Flushing is my home. I cannot imagine living anywhere else. I often tell people that my rent-stabilized apartment is the only reason I still live in New York, in my home, in my neighborhood. However, accelerating the rate at which rent increases threatens to take that reality away from me and a million other rent-stabilized households throughout the city. That's my personal experience, but allow me to share my professional one as well. I work at Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem, a public defense office where we assist housing insecure New Yorkers daily. For each percentage point that rent goes up, that's another few dozen of my clients and their families who cannot afford it. People are already living on the margins, spending sometimes 70% of their income on their rent. The numbers are not adding up. and there's nowhere for these people to go. There are 27 apartments listed for under $1,500 across the entire city. And that number includes unsafe and illegal basement units. When we allow rent-stabilized apartments to become unaffordable, where will the people live? You may want to shrug your shoulders and let that happen, but let me say this. If you're in this room today, chances are you love New York City. You think this place is special. So do I, but those advocating for higher rents clearly disagree with me about what makes this place special. New York is special because of the people and the families who have made it so for centuries. When those people are not able to afford to live here anymore, it will just be a big place with big buildings and a soulless underbelly. A playground for the wealthy, shell LLCs, and their tax shelter pied-à-terres. New York City is not your playground. There are real people with real communities and real families who are being forced out daily for marginal gains on a balance sheet. How is a reasonable response to the ongoing crisis, the largest rent increases in a decade? The board has an obligation to reverse course and provide relief to our neighbors who are struggling. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Alex Jacobs. And while we're waiting for Alex, let me announce the next three speakers: Amelia DeCowden, Sebastian Baez, and Saleha Sitar. Thank you.
Hi, how are you doing? My name is Alex. I'm a tenants' rights attorney, but I'm not here speaking as a lawyer. I'm just here speaking as somebody that lives in the city. I think it's important that we define the two different groups that we're talking about today. When we're talking about people who own rent-stabilized units, we're talking about people who primarily own units in buildings where there are 6 or more of these units, right? We're not talking about people who own 1 or 2 family homes. And when we're talking about the tenants who live here, we're talking about people who make, on average, around $45,000 to $50,000 a year, people who would be qualified if they were facing eviction. We should also mention that when we're talking about people who own rent-stabilized units, the grievances they have isn't that they don't have a profitable business, it's that it's not as profitable as it used to be. 10, 15, 20 years ago, when the rent increases were going up and they were at their most profitable, were the landlords here saying, no, we can take a smaller rent increase because our tenants are hurting? No, of course not. The first speaker who said that he lives in an area with high turnover and he was fortunate to own his buildings for 40 or 50 years and make all of the money that he has now to where he can continue to run his profitable business. Was he 20 or 30 years ago saying, hold on 1 second, we're squeezing my tenants dry? I don't think he said that. I think it's also important to remember that the people who are living in these apartments are people who, without the stability that's afforded to them, who without the knowledge that they have a safe and clean place to live, who don't have the guarantee otherwise of knowing that next year when their leases are coming, that they're entitled to a place to live. If they didn't have this, they wouldn't be there. As the last speaker said, this city is losing its soul. I've only been here about 10 years, but I look outside and I can tell you that people are hurting. And if we're looking to raise the rent 3, 4, 5%, it's going to get worse. So I think it's really, really important that we keep in mind that the argument here from the landlords isn't that they're not making money, it's that they're not making enough money. The problem that they have, right, isn't that their business is losing money, it's that they want you to subsidize their business. In no other industry is this allowed to happen. If I had a pizza place that was making 20% income year after year, I don't then get to go and tell the city that I should be making 25% year after year because I did before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Amelia DeCowden, thank you.
Hello, my name is Amelia DeCowden, and I am a rent-stabilized tenant in Long Island City, as well as a Democratic district leader representing LIC, Sunnyside, Woodside, Maspeth, and Ridgewood. My family and my constituents, who also live in rent-stabilized housing across this district, are struggling to pay rent in this current climate. I pay over 30% of my income in rent, and boy does it hurt every first of the month. And I have an affordable apartment on top of that with HDC's M2 program that I can barely afford. Sunnyside in particular and Ridgewood both have large rent-stabilized complexes, for instance, Cosmopolitan houses, where I also used to live, where families are already being squeezed by MCI increases and the previous rent increases from last year. New York City claims to be a city with open arms, a haven and a refuge for immigrants, for workers, for queer people. But how can we say that when we're talking about increases of up to 7%, when people can barely afford to stay here, let alone find safe haven here? As a trans woman, this is especially personal to me when I talk to people in states like Florida and Texas, who are facing laws that criminalize their existence. And I want to tell them, move to New York. It's a place that will welcome you. And before I can even get that out of my mouth, they say, Amelia, I know what you're going to say. And no, I can't move to Queens. I can't afford to live there because of the rents. I call on this board not only to consider not implementing these increases of up to 7% on 2-year leases, but to consider a rent rollback. The right of New Yorkers in Queens and across the city to stay in their homes and to be able to find safe haven here and to find an affordable existence here is more important than the profit margins of people like the friend who just spoke earlier today and other landlords to make just a little bit more money. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sebastian Baez? Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. The board is here in Queens today to consider rent adjustments on rent-stabilized units in Queens, but also across the city. You have a mandate and also a moral obligation to keep that rent stabilized in the rent-stabilized laws. And that means for Queens tenants, as well as the rest of the city's stabilized tenants, a rent freeze, or even better, a rent rollback, a rent reduction. Can we get some support for that? At a time when evictions are sky high, at a time when landlords continue to profit off of their units of not just one building, but multiple buildings, where their rent rolls are continually profitable, and we're seeing very, very high rent increases both in the rent stabilized and the non-stabilized market, the non-rent regulated market. Now is the time to preserve and stabilize those rents, okay? Rent-stabilized apartments account for almost 1 million units. That's a huge fraction of the city's population. A rent increase of the proposed amount by the board would be unreasonable for the vast majority of tenants who aren't just barely getting by, but are paying so much of their rent today and will be paying even more of the rent, if not, will be moving out of the city tomorrow. So I'm asking the board, again, on behalf of the tenants who make the city great, who have a right to live in the city and not be forced out by unreasonable increases, a rent freeze, or even better, a rent rollback. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Saleha Sitar. And while we're waiting, I'll announce our next 3 speakers. Mahmudur Khan, Douglas Ostling, and Andrew Solikoff Diaz. Please, thank you.
My name is Saleha Sattar. I live in 8815 168 Estate, Jamaica, NY 11432. My landlord is Zara Holding Corporation. I live this building since 2017. During COVID-19, I was out of work for 3 years due to immigration backlog. And I have to pay more than 60% my current income as rent. For this reason, I have to increase the amount of work in this my middle age just for house rent. We came from underdevelopment country to development country only for peaceful life. But here in Zara building, just this room is full of rats and cockroach. So I request to stop continuous harassment of land givers, heinous conspiracy in the name of MCI. So I just request to you again, this 7% rent increase is too much for us. In this situation, nobody solved our existing problem, now 7% again. So I earnestly request to you, please solve this problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Mahmudur Khan, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm a tenant. I've been living in Queens for last 15 years. I'm a resident of Elmhurst. For this year, the raise that you guys are proposing, it goes way above for us because we have to look at our expenses. Our incomes don't match the raise in the rent. And another thing is, a lot of the buildings that we see around in Queens and in Elmhurst, in Forest Hills, in Jackson Heights, in Astoria, the landlords, they are hoarding the apartments. They are not letting those apartments go on the market. I don't know the math logic behind it, but there is something going on where the city can step in by simply asking for a list of the apartments that have not been rented out beyond 6 months. So, and then there is two other things that's going on at the same time in the city, which is very alarming. Right now, the city has highest number of eviction cases in the court. I don't work with the court, but I think there is around 16,000 cases, but I'm not confirmed on the number. But there is about 16,000 eviction cases going on in New York City housing courts. That is unprecedented. That has never happened before. So the city needs to step up and see what's going on. Like, what is the reason for all those people not being able to pay their rent all of a sudden? People don't necessarily choose to leave their apartment. They don't want, it's not like they do want to pay the rent and live and raise their kids in the apartment where they have been living. But something's happening now that where they are not able to cope up with the raise in the rent. And another thing is there is a lot of shell companies, LLCs, that are moving in. So when those guys are moving in, they're buying up these apartments, these commercial buildings, where they're like hoarding it, they're keeping it for investment purposes, or their whole point is like to raise the rents, to jack up the rents so that justifies their ROI. So the city needs to see what's going on over there. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Douglas Ostling. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Douglas Ostling, a retired facilities manager living in a Zara-owned building in Flushing. This board's proposed 7% increase is unwarranted and excessive, especially on the heels of the hefty hike granted last year. You should demand greater accountability from landlords instead of gifting them an early Christmas every spring at tenant expense. I live on a fixed income. I can't count on political cronies to grant me annual revenue windfalls or avail myself of economies of scale as most landlords can. I don't have access to the financial advantages property owners do, and I can't leverage my buying power to exact kickbacks and concessions from contractors and suppliers. I can't save by pooling personnel between buildings, can't cut operating costs by ignoring repairs, DOB violations, and ADA requirements, or pass on the cost of improvements to tenants by way of bloated MCIs, or harass and bleed them with an assortment of illicit charges and fees. Asking people to choose between rent and food and medicine is beyond unfair. It's obscene and immoral, and driving force in the housing crisis today. I'm being squeezed at the gas pump, at the supermarket, and at the pharmacy. And if I get squeezed anymore, I'll be living out of a cardboard box on the street. I urge this board to put a moratorium on rent increases, or at bare minimum, return them to pre-COVID levels in the range of 1% to 2%. Anything more will only reward unscrupulous landlords and poorly run properties and convert them into veritable slot machines, best regulated not by you, but by the State Gaming Commission, like other casinos. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Andrew Sokoloff-Diaz, and then we'll be joined by our public advocate, Jimani Williams. Andrew Diaz? Is Andrew here? All right. Okay, well, we can make sure to get him before we close. Let me then introduce our public advocate. We're delighted to be joined by Jamani Williams. Thank you.
Peace and blessing, love and light, everyone. Thank you, board, for giving me the opportunity. For decades, the city of New York has been in a perpetual housing crisis, suffering from predatory landlords, skyrocketing rent, and the increases of eviction among particularly communities of more color and communities that are working and middle class. The fact that we don't see the connection between rising rents and homelessness is very strange to me. But the pandemic continues to greatly exacerbate our city's homelessness and affordable housing crisis. As you know, the city is now the highest rental market in the nation, and some say the entire world. I do know whenever there's issues, I always say that landlords, property owners, and utility companies get to go to tenants and customers to help them. I don't know where the tenants and customers go when they need help. Just so we're aware, this time, over 50% of New Yorkers are currently rent burdened. If New York City rent and wages kept pace with productivity since 1980, minimum wage would be $61,675, and rents would be $1,541 per month. However, the average minimum wage in New York City is $43,932, which means the average median rent should be $1,098. The median rent in Manhattan is over $4,000. Our city is growing ever more unaffordable and inaccessible to people who call it home. Currently, 2 million New Yorkers live in rent-stabilized housing. When we subject these tenants, often already on fixed incomes, to massive tenant-to-rent increases, they're not able to go rent on outrageously unaffordable apartments. With a vacancy rate under 5% and an average rent through the roof, rent-stabilized tenants have nowhere to turn to. We have 92,000 New Yorkers without a home right now. If the board follows through with the proposed increases, they vote to add even more families, children, disabled New Yorkers, and lifelong neighbors to that number. And I always want to make sure I'm clear, because I do know that there are property owners who need assistance. Usually we put small homeowners, black and brown immigrant homeowners in the front, and they sometimes need assistance, but oftentimes they're put in the front to protect very large and corporate owners who are not in the same boat. And I think the small owners should be joining the tenants, saying that they need assistance and trying to get some of the assistance from the government, because we are in some problems. But rewarding bad actors, rewarding folks on the worst landlord list, and trying to get rent from people who simply don't have it only exacerbates our problem. We do know that the state, they come back home without any resolution to our housing crisis. It seems that everybody's compartmentalizing themselves and pointing fingers and saying that they can't solve the problem. What I do know now is you cannot get more rent from people who simply do not have it. And so we'll have to find a way to assist everyone, particularly those who need assistance. But these tenants do as well. And we've seen time and time again that all we do is add to the homelessness and housing crisis. We have to begin to talk about those things, two things together. And I hope the board will consider that, and consider that just because you raise rent on these folks doesn't mean you're helping the owners who need the assistance, because they can't get money from people who don't have it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me just ask again, has Andrew Sokoloff-Diaz joined us? Okay. Our next three speakers will be Jenny Dubnow, Mitchell Slee-Clay, excuse me if I mispronounced, Slee-Clay, and Nahida Begum. Thank you.
My name is Jenny Dubnow, and I've lived in Jackson Heights for over 20 years. I grew up in Washington Heights, Manhattan, in a rent-stabilized apartment. This affordable rent was key to my parents' ability to keep our family of 5 decently housed. Now, decades later, New York City has lost hundreds of thousands of apartments to deregulation, and for literally millions of people, affordable stabilized rent is the one thing standing between being housed and becoming homeless. The median income of rent-stabilized tenants is $47,000, and the average New York City tenant is severely rent-burdened. People struggle to pay their rent and bills for food, medicine, and electricity. Housing is a human right. Despite the fact that these are matters of basic survival, made far worse by the pandemic, last year, rent-stabilized tenants were hit with the largest rent increases in a decade. As for landlords, despite their tears, they still make a hefty average profit, close to 30%. That's insane. On rent-stabilized units, despite the reported increase in operating costs. And most of the decreases in profit taking actually happened in relatively wealthy areas in Manhattan, where tenants temporarily vacated their apartments during COVID. According to the CSS, landlords' income actually grew in every borough except Manhattan, and people are coming back to their apartments, so the tiers don't mean much to me. Landlord net operating income has soared by 50% since 1990, even accounting for inflation. And most landlords in New York with rent-stabilized units are not mom-and-pop landlords. More and more are wealthy corporations with large portfolios of buildings. They're doing just fine. So this brings us to the heart of the matter. Is the role of the RGB to guarantee landlords' continued astronomical rate of return? Why is such a high profit considered normal when 1 out of every 10 New York City public school students is unhoused? Are you the guarantors of landlords' high profit or the guardians of tenants' basic need for a roof over their heads? No landlord is facing the streets or choosing not to buy medicine or food. They can take a little less profit. And to the landlord friend who just spoke, you could go get a job.
Mitchell Seaclay, thank you.
Evening.
Thank you.
Start with a question. How many of you own a home? Raise your hands. How many actual own? How many people own a home here? Okay, but your home values are published on the internet. Why aren't the values of these buildings published? Their expenses published, so everybody can see right up front, good or bad, what's going on. Because under what basis would you raise rents? I don't see the basis. You're entitled to a raise, but only under certain circumstances, which can't be surmised because we don't have any of the figures. They are with the landlords. So the point being that they should come clean and at least tell us what their income is, what their assets are, and what their rents are. And that's not being done. So the reality is, hey, I can come and say, hey, I need 50%. And under what basis would you give me 50%? Well, I just need it. Well, that's not going to cut it. The other thing is that they have MCIs, they have other published sources of income, and none of them can prove the expenses of which they're claiming. So under what basis would you raise rents? And before I leave for this short message, the US government, the state, or the city just gave a population that doesn't live here $4 billion, where the average individual that's worked hard all his life, he's asked to squeeze for more. Under what basis? Thank you.
Thank you. Nahida Begum.
Thank you for opportunity to speak here. My name is Nahida Begum and I am resident of 140-60 Beach Avenue, Flushing, Queens. I have been living here since 2000. I am a cancer survivor and a single mother. My only source of income is my SSI benefit, which is almost nothing for now. I am using almost 80% of my income only for my rent. My landlord is Jara Realty, own 42 buildings. This is their family business. They have lot of money. They can get help from the government. Not only me, every single Jara tenant has repair and maintenance issue in our apartment or in the building. On top of it, they are changing us various fees, other plus 3 MCI, rent increase, and they are harassing us with their ill intention. They can get help many ways. So RGB, if you increase 7% rent and MCI increase, we cannot afford it. Please don't try to kill me. Be human and work for helpless tenants, for not greedy wealthy landlord. Thank you, and for your good consideration, we can get help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we will hear from New York City Council member Julie Wan. Is the council member here? Okay. Well, the borough president then, Donovan Richard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. And I am here. I'm Queensborough President Donovan Richards, and I'm here to say the rent is too damn high in Queens and certainly in New York City. Queens and all, don't applaud. Let me get through this testimony. Queens and all of New York City are in the throes of a housing crisis unlike any we've experienced before. The number of families in our homeless shelters and the overall cost of living, from food prices to utility bills to transportation costs and beyond, continues to rise rapidly. We must move with the urgency of now to keep families in their homes, keep the cost of living in check, and ensure our communities remain healthy, affordable places to live. However, the proposed rent hikes before the Rent Guidelines Board couldn't be more misguided and dangerous. Such steep increases are nothing more than a slap in the face to hardworking New Yorkers who already are struggling to put food on their tables or keep a roof over their heads. A second straight year of dramatic rent hikes is not only untenable, but it will drastically displace more residents from neighborhoods like the very one we're in today. And it is further proof that there is no mission more critical at this moment than rapidly and dramatically growing our affordable housing stock. I am proud to say Queens produced more housing developments than any other place in the city last year, and there's more work that has to be done to once again increase our housing stock. I'm deeply proud of the work our office is doing to bring more affordable housing to communities from Astoria to Auburn, and we will continue to leave no stone unturned in that effort. But we cannot afford to undo that progress with proposed rent hikes like the ones you proposed. Queens needs the Rent Guideline Board to be a partner, not an impediment in keeping our borough affordable for all. So I implore the Rent Guidelines Board to reverse course, stand with the hard-working renters of Queens, and keep our borough affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Has Councilmember Wan joined us?
RGB escucha, estamos en la lucha.
Thank you. Thank you. Please.
Estamos en la lucha.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Estamos en la lucha. RGB escucha, estamos
Thank you.
en la lucha.
Good evening, everybody. It's so good to see you. My name is Julie Wan. I'm currently the council member representing Long Island City, Woodside, Sunnyside, and Astoria. We got Woodside in the house. Woodside power! Tenant power! It's so good to see you all. Thank you for making the time to be here to listen. As a tenant, my district is 80% renters. Growing up, my first memories after arriving to the United States is every single month we would collect quarters and we would count how many quarters we had so that we could do laundry. And if we had enough, we would either do laundry or we had to do laundry in the bathtub with my mom because we had to make sure that we could make rent. For you or anybody in this room who may not feel the rent burden, like my district where more than 50% are rent burdened, whether it's 3%, 5%, or 6%, to you it may not seem like a lot. Whether it's $75 more a month, $50 more a month, $150 more a month, or $200, that can be a whole entire month of groceries for some families. That could be a whole month of other needs like laundry and other needs for the family that is really going to hurt and cost our families. We're here as a district to say no to rent increases. We want a rent freeze, even better if we get rent rollbacks, but we will continue to fight. We are here in solidarity to say no to rent increases. Thank you so much for listening, and come on, please, have some mercy.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Our next three speakers will be Jonathan Bloom, Moriam Perven, and Maria Segura. Jonathan? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I'm here with Woodside on the Move, representing tenants in Woodside. I am a recent graduate from Parsons. I had Alex Schwartz, who sits on the board, teaching me housing policy last semester. And I'm here to really talk to each and every one of you, to ask you, implore you to freeze the rent. I want to put some numbers, put some perspective on it. I signed my lease 2 years ago. If the proposed increases go through, my rent will be up by almost 10% over those 2 years. I can tell you, my income has not increased a penny. If a rent-stabilized tenant signed a lease in 2012, and they signed 2-year leases each year, their rent would be 21% higher. That's before this year's proposed increases over a decade. I'm telling you, nobody has seen their income rise by 21%. We talk about rent burden, we talk about the numbers. Julie just mentioned the rent burden percentage in our district. I am one of those people. I pay over 50% of my income in rent, and mine will become more rent burdened if you raise the rent. That means sacrifices in food, healthcare, bills, clothing, essentials. So really, when we're here, we just want to live. We just want to be able to survive and thrive in New York City. The landlord lobby is going to tell you that they need the money. I'm asking you not to believe them. We, tenants, they've had the opportunity to raise the rent by over 15, 20% over the last decade. We need the relief right now. There's no relief coming from Albany. There's no relief coming from the federal government. We need the Rent Guidelines Board to step in and do the right thing, protect tenants, keep tenants in their homes, freeze the rent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Maureen Pervin. Maureen Pervin. Thank you.
Thank you, RGB, for the opportunity. I have been a Queens Rent stabilized tenant since 2000. The decision this board makes impact millions of New Yorkers, many of whom are struggling to remain in their home. The most urgent problem facing low-income New Yorkers, including the effect of the city's chronic housing crisis. High rent forces tenants to leave NYC because of their housing cost. According to renter, most tenants are rent burdened in the New York City and paying more than 30% of their income in rent. According to OTDA, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP, has paid out $201.75 million to New York City landlords for missed rent. No data were available on the Landlord Rental Assistance Program, LRAP, the historical large amount of the public money paid to landlords to recoup their COVID-related rental shortfall through ERAP and the LRAP program. Therefore, no need to repay these landlords once again through a rent increase on all rent-established tenants. A 7% RGB rent increase could push many into non-payment, eviction, and homeless situation. The rent guideline board should not make rent-established tenants pay rent they cannot afford. In order to repay landlord for all losses they have already recouped. I encourage the Rent Guideline Board to reject call for a rent increase of any kind. At the end of the day, landlords have the tremendously valued assets on their hands. Tenants have no such economic advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Maria Segura. Maria Segura? Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es María Segura. Vivo en la 4846 de la 47 Street, en Woodside, Queens, por 30 años. Mi casero es Cosmopolitan Asociados.
Hear me? Hello, hello. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Segura. I live at 4846 47th Street, Woodside, Queens, for 30 years. My landlord is Cosmopolitan Associates.
Soy una madre que ha tenido que salir adelante con mis dos hijas de mi esfuerzo y trabajo arduo.
I'm a single mother who has had to, chase opportunities to live with for myself and also my two daughters, and I work very hard.
Como la mayoría de los aquí presentes, mis ingresos como home attendant son sumamente limitados y apenas me permiten sobrevivir con los altos costos como es la vivienda y de la canasta familiar.
Like the majority of the people here, my income as a home attendant is extremely limited, and it barely allows me to survive with the high cost of living and just the general family standard of living.
Mi casero en los últimos años despiadadamente nos ha llenado de NCI, muchos incrementos de renta, escudándose en ese hueco de la ley llamado NCI, que es el culpable no solo de la eliminación de la vivienda asequible, pero también de que miles de familias pobres como la mía se hayan visto forzados a desalojarlos.
Un momento, señora. So my landlord in the last few years has filled us up with MCIs and lots of rent increases. And he's hiding within that loophole of the law that's called MCI, which is responsible not only for the elimination of affordable housing, but as well as having millions of poor families like mine see themselves basically evicted.
Les ha sido imposible mantener la comida en la mesa y pagar los exagerados costos de vivienda. Hoy en día, las cortes reposan los archivos de miles de inquilinos que serán desalojados por deudas imposibles de pagar.
So it has been very impossible for many people to bring food to the table and to pay the exaggerated costs of living. Nowadays, the courts are full of filed cases of thousands of tenants that are being evicted due to impossible debts that they have to pay. And
y de quienes la avaricia de los caseros sigue contando cada minuto para procesar una evicción más y dejar en la calle a quienes un día pensaron que su vivienda era hasta el día de su muerte.
And also, due to the landlord's greediness, they keep counting minute by minute in order to process evictions and to leave out in the streets people who who thought that they would stay in those homes until they passed.
Es triste y vergonzoso a la vez venir cada año frente a ustedes a mendigar nuestro derecho a la vivienda, que es un derecho humano.
Thank you.
It's very sad and embarrassing to come here every year in front of you guys and beg for something that's our right, which is a standard of living, which is a basic human right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Y no hay excusa
Gracias.
para robarlo de nuestras familias trabajadoras que después de la pandemia no pudieron levantarse en sus pies y retomar sus vidas. Al contrario, formaron parte de la existencia y se convirtieron en desamparados.
Thank you.
So there's no excuse to steal from our hardworking families who, after the pandemic, were not able to stand on their own 2 feet and redo their lives. In the opposite way, they formed part of the statistics and they became homeless. Gracias.
Señores de la Junta Directiva, el clamor repetido de todos los aquí presentes, basta ya.
So, ladies and gentlemen of the board, what we're saying over here is, and we repeat it, is we're done. It's enough.
Thank
Hoy,
you. Thank
hoy
you.
ustedes pueden hacer el
Thank you,
cambio
Thank you.
y harán historia y demandarán con la consecuencia, con la conciencia tranquila.
Thank you.
Los cambios ya explotaron hasta la saciedad y nos llevamos sus arcas en la riqueza. Es ahora, la vivienda es un derecho para ricos y pobres.
Today
Thank you. Thank you. Please. Thank you.
Today you can make a change. You can make history and sleep with a clean conscience. The landlords have exploited us until we're basically empty, and they're just filling their pockets continuously with their riches. Living and housing is a human right for everyone, rich and poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next three speakers, thank you. Thank you. Our next three speakers, thank you. Thank you. Our next three speakers are Pamela Herrera, Basilio Garcia, and Guillermo Zapata. Pamela Herrera?
Interpretación, por favor.
Sorry, is Pamela Herrera here?
Pamela Herrera. Ella primero, señora.
¿Ella primero?
Sí,
Hi.
señora.
Thank you
Pamela.
very much.
Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you.
Herrera, and I am the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator with Woodside on the Move. I've been organizing buildings since July of 2022 and can give you hundreds of scenarios of families, individuals, and homeless people. Tenants not only face an annual increase, but they endure a lack of heat, hot water, kitchen appliances, pest infestations, hazardous conditions, break-ins, and much more. Some tenants get hit with the major capital improvement along with the annual increase, an increase that benefits the landlord's wealth, not the tenants. With all of the ongoing condition tenants have to put up with due to the negligence of landlords, they have to prioritize paying rent over nutrition, prioritize rent that's well over 30% of their annual income for a unit that provides minimal security. Several issues come from overburdening tenants. They can become homeless, lose their job, and develop mental health issues. Numerous families live paycheck to paycheck, and any Department of Housing and Urban Development, Office of Policy Development and Research on Housing and Neighborhoods' role in shaping children's future, which I printed out for you if you'd like to take a look, states that children are vulnerable to influences from their residential surroundings. The quality of the environment in which young people learn and grow has serious implications for their physical health, behavioral and emotional welfare, school achievement, and economic opportunity, affecting them directly and indirectly through its impact on parents and the significant adults in their lives. You can change the course of history on June 21st by rolling back the rent. Landlords will continue to profit and the gap will widen. Take a look at the landlord's assets. What rent-stabilized tenants have enough equity to own their own home? Some have been occupying their apartment for 20 years without owning their unit. They deserve a secure, affordable, and habitable home. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Garcia. Basilio Garcia. Thank you.
Buenas noches a todo el panel.
Good evening
Mi
to the
nombre es
RGB.
Basilio García.
My name is Basilio Garcia.
Podemos ver atrás mío personas retiradas y también podemos ver detrás de mí personas de bajos ingresos.
You can see behind me people that are retired and also people that are low income.
¿Cómo pretendemos, y me estoy refiriendo a ustedes, cómo pretendemos subir el alquiler para las personas de renta regulada?
How do you expect, or how do we expect, and when I say we, I mean you, how do you expect to raise the rent for people that are paying regulated rent?
Yo creo para mí que esto es un abuso de ustedes y de los landlords. Y creo ver de dónde vienen los tiros cuando esto no se puede percibir así.
I think this is abuse on the part of the landlords and obviously you as well. And I'd like to see where it is that the gunshots will be coming from, because this is something that is not sustainable.
Creo, para mi parecer, que tenemos que crear conciencia para hacer las cosas que tenemos que hacer, recordando que somos humanos.
I believe,
Y como de seres humanos que
I believe
somos,
we have to create awareness so that we can do the things that we're supposed to do, and we must remember that we are human beings.
tenemos que recordar que cuando nos llegue el día a nosotros, tendremos que darle cuenta, no a mí, sino a alguien más grande que yo.
And
de
please
lo que nosotros
realize,
hicimos.
and please realize that everyone will have their day. And when we meet our Maker, we will have to tell our Maker what it is that we've done in our lives. You won't have to tell me, you will have to tell him.
Esto es inconcebible e inaceptable.
This is inconceivable and unacceptable.
No lo vamos a tolerar.
And we will not tolerate it.
Thank you.
Así que yo les pido a ustedes como junta reguladora de renta que
So I ask
creen
you again,
conciencia.
So I ask you again, as the RGB, to please create awareness.
Porque esto es una forma de llevarnos, ¿sabe qué? Al desalojo. Y eso es lo que no queremos. En sus manos está eso de que ustedes esta noche tomen la dirección correcta.
This is a one-way
Y se acabe
street.
el abuso.
This is a one-way street to eviction, and you tonight can make the right decision and make sure that what needs to be done is done.
Tenemos que ver lo que nos va a sobrevenir más después de esto, que ustedes quizás lo saben, no lo quieren decir, pero yo sé que en su conciencia ustedes saben lo que están haciendo.
I'm sure that you all
Thank
know
you.
what it is that you're doing, and your conscience will dictate that.
Thank you.
Así que con esto me despido, que Dios me los bendiga.
I bid farewell. God bless you all.
Thank you. Guillermo Zapata. Guillermo Zapata. Is Guillermo?
Guillermo Zapata.
Is Guillermo here? Guillermo Zapata?
Guillermo Zapata.
All right, let me announce our next three speakers. If you could please prepare to come up and join us. Diva Lima, Everardo Aguilar, and Adolfi Alcindor. Diva Lima.
Diva Lima.
Okay. Everardo Aguilar.
Señor Aguilar.
Thank you.
Buenas noches, señores de la Junta Reguladora de Alquileres.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the RGB.
Una vez más veo las mismas caras de frente de hace un año atrás.
Again, I see the same faces I saw last year.
Es lo mismo, yo sé dentro de mí que aunque crean que no van a subir la renta, ustedes la van a subir.
Again, I know, deep down inside, I know that you will raise the rent again.
Siento que pierdo tiempo al venir aquí.
I feel as though I'm losing my time
Porque
by
al
coming
final
here.
ustedes hacen lo que le da la gana.
Because again,
Así de
you
fácil.
do what you wish. You do what you wish anyway.
No le vamos a pagar ni un centavo más.
We're not going to pay you one
No
more
porque
red
no
cent.
queremos.
Not because we don't want to,
No podemos.
but because we
Que
can't.
es la diferencia entre poder y querer.
And that's the difference between being able to and wanting to.
Nos están echando a la calle.
You're throwing us out on the
Dejamos de
streets.
comer un plato de comida
We
para pagarle
actually,
renta a ustedes.
we actually go without eating so we can pay for our
No hay
rent.
conciencia, no hay.
This is
Realmente-
unconscionable.
No tienen conciencia, nos están poniendo en las calles.
You have no conscience. You're
Ustedes
throwing
nos
us
están
out in the
poniendo
street.
En la acera del frente.
You're putting us out
en
on
la
the
calle.
sidewalk.
Porque no es el 50%, el 65% de lo que vivimos cheque a cheque.
Because it's not 50%, it's
El
65% of us that live check,
35%
check to
restante
check.
nos queda para los utilidades
Whatever is
básicas,
left is to pay for utilities, basic
pagar la
utilities,
luz,
to pay for our electric bill.
Necesitamos para nuestros hijos el internet.
We need the internet service for our
Y
children.
como todos usamos celular también.
And because we all
¿Qué
use
nos
cell
queda del
phone,
35%?
what is left of the
Ni pa' un plato de
35%?
comida.
We can't even pay for
Entonces,
groceries.
señores, ¿qué hacemos aquí?
So what
De
are we
nuevo
doing
de
here?
frente a ustedes,
Again, before
que
you.
No, aunque lloremos aquí,
Even if we cry
ustedes
before
no van a
you,
subir la renta.
you will raise our rent.
Porque es una hipocresía, no
It
la
is
van a subir.
hypocrisy on
Digan lo
your
que
side.
digan, la van a subir.
Say what you will
Sin
raise it again.
pensar en qué vamos a comer.
Without even
¿Qué
thinking
vamos
so
a
much
hacer
as what we will
mañana?
eat, what we will do tomorrow.
Las rentas crecen
Rents go up
y los salarios bajan.
and salaries go down.
Y vivimos como sardina en lata vivimos.
And we live
Le
like sardines.
pagamos a los landlords,
And we
a los
pay
dueños de
landlords.
casa, le pagamos su cuota bancaria.
We pay their bank quota. We pay
Estamos
their bank.
pagando su morgue.
We're paying
Pero
their
no tienen
mortgage.
conciencia que nosotros y nuestros hijos
But they're not
nos
aware
vamos a
that
morir de hambre porque
we,
ustedes nos
our
ponen
families, our
patita
children will
fuera
die
de
of
la
hunger
casa. Gracias.
because you throw us out of our homes.
Thank you. Sorry. We have a question, please. One moment, we have a question.
Yeah, let's stick to maybe consecutive interpretation because simultaneous is hard to hear, and I hear two voices. I know.
So with all due respect, the interpreters are here to do consecutive, but people are not giving us the chance to do so. Les pedimos por favor que cuando pasen adelante tienen que dejarnos a nosotros hacer la traducción consecutiva, porque entonces se torna algo muy confuso para todos. Estamos hablando las dos personas a la misma vez. Cuando usted hable, por favor, deténgase un momento para que podamos hacer debidamente la interpretación y luego usted sigue con su testimonio. Si seguimos en esto, va a parecer un circo. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Everardo Aguilar? Aguilar? Is Andrew Sokoloff Diaz here? Andrew, thank you.
Good evening, buenas tardes. My name is Andrew Sokoloff Diaz. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a co-founder with the 89th Street Tenants Unidos Association in Jackson Heights, Queens. Last year, we spoke here about what we've endured when over 500 rent-stabilized tenants were displaced in the blink of an eye due to an 8-alarm fire. That was in 2021. Our buildings were unrepaired before this fire. We don't know exactly how that fire really occurred. We're after the city agencies as well who don't do their job, who are maybe underfunded by design, and it's up to you guys. It's up to y'all sitting here tonight to really deliver for working class New Yorkers. Since then, this board unfortunately has approved multiple rent hikes, and those votes and margins matter. Every single vote that y'all take matters on this board. These hikes, you know, always fall on the backs of working families who face so many burdens, the inflation, the insane rent prices. It is criminal. It is truly fucking criminal. Mayor Adams wants to also hike our rents on our backs. And it is in your mission and purpose to sit in your chairs tonight to decide on how to keep rent affordable in the city. You know well we're in the midst of an affordability crisis, a housing crisis, so many crises. The air is dirty, and a report recently, just to throw in some statistics, by the Fund for New York City found that half of all city households do not make enough to meet the minimum cost of living. We can barely eat, we can barely get to work, and then we're criminalized to go to work as well. Nearly 80% of New Yorkers are considered housing burden. I will finish very quickly. If you approve an additional hike, it is going to harm countless New Yorkers, whom you and I know, essential workers who took care of us during COVID, and who continue to cook and clean our homes and drive us to and from work, our most vulnerable, seniors, people who are disabled who cannot be here tonight because they can risk getting sick and die. They will be put on the street because of your vote. Do not condemn us. Do not condemn your neighbors to further displacement. We want to go back to our buildings. We have homeless people who are our tenants, who are here tonight to plead with you to vote no.
Thank you.
One more sentence. You can deliver for us when Albany, when the spineless city council leadership doesn't want to approve housing remedies, when the mayor especially doesn't want to. Vote for a rent rollback. Queens deserves it. New York City renters deserve it. We need you to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Adolphi Alcindor. Is Mr. Alcindor here? Adolphi Alcindor. Is Mr. Alcindor here? Thank you. Thank you. All right, our next three speakers, thank you, are George Ramos, Doris Gomez, and Nick Galota. Thank you. That's him. Here. Yes. Yes, thank you. Mr. Ramos, I think he's prepared to speak.
Oh, he's first? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. And then we'll hear from you, Ms. Gomez. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name is George R. Ramos, and I'm here with Woodside on the Move. I live at 4141 51st Street, apartment 5E, in Woodside, Queens, since 1982. Our household situation is I have a disability and I had to retire in 2017. COVID-19 affected us because my wife was only working 4 days a week. My wife is in a lot of pain and discomfort due to her job and will retire next year. A rent increase will impact our other needs because we will have to cut back on food, medicine, and health, and we will be able to do less with our income. Why your landlord doesn't deserve an increase. Currently, the landlord owns 7 buildings in the city, which generates him profit. He has issued 2 MCIs, which increased our rent. I suggest that instead of an annual increase, that will drastically reduce my wife and my quality of life. The mayor should continue to provide tax breaks for repairs like those that qualify for an MCI. A lot of tenants are behind in their rent payment because of COVID-19. And I mean, we can all think whether we have, you know, we cannot pay the rent, but
thank you.
If we're the owners, we can still say, well, I understand them, and we should all be, you know, just good, you know, people with everybody else, and knowing if they can't, you know, they can't really afford it, I'm going to help them out. We need it, and we need you to help us, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Gomez. Thank you. Thank you. Please. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Doris Gomez, and I live in Left Rock City. And right now, I'm going through a lot of things with them. They raised the rent too much, and they have a lot of damage in the apartment. I'm very sick. They have a big mold in my bathroom. They never fix anything, and the rates go up. Which one of you sleep right in the nighttime? All of you, right? You have nothing to worry. You have no things in your mind. You can sleep well, right? And then all the rents go increase. And this is not fair. I don't think none of you going through all this, right? You sleep very good and very calm in your house. the woman, the man, everything, all of you, okay? And then we poor people, we have to pay all this rent for what? They don't fix nothing. They have a big rat going to the left, right in the laundry. Next time I was going to do wash. Big rat. I let him go. I went back upstairs. I let the big rat go first. And the big roaches, not the small ones, the big ones. Okay, that's what left frac have. A whole bunch of roach and a whole bunch of rat. And the rents go up, and nothing to do. I'm just don't know what to do. And they want to throw me out for the rent going up. That's not fair, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Nick Gulata. Thank you, Nick.
Good evening. My name is Nick Gulota, and I'm a rent-stabilized tenant. My family is facing a daunting $120 monthly increase this year. I also presently serve as the Chief of Staff to Councilmember Julie Wan, and in our office, I speak with seniors every single day who are on a fixed income, whose Social Security checks or Section 8 vouchers can no longer cover their rent. Each month, they choose between paying for food and paying their rent, and many are just days from being evicted. Their benefits haven't increased, their vouchers haven't increased, but year after year, their rent has, and they cannot afford another rent increase. This year, my family requested our rent history from DHCR, and it was heartbreaking when I looked at it to see a long history of how our state's laws were exploited to inflate our rents, our legal regulated rent up to $550 each year for a vacancy increase after a tenant was forced out. Prior to the passage of the 2019 rent laws, our landlord raised preferential rent $250 on the seniors who lived in our home before us, Ms. Tanya Santos and Mr. Ramon Garcia. Each time they renewed their lease, even during the 2015 and 2016 rent freezes under the previous mayor, they had their rent increase because of the previous preferential rent system. Remember, $250 in a single year when there was a citywide rent freeze. That family was forced out of New York City because it became too expensive. That is the reason why our New Yorkers are leaving the city. It is fueling gentrification and the housing crisis. Now, the Rent Guidelines Board is proposing rent increases for units where loopholes were unfairly exploited for decades. Remember, you are proposing increases on units where loopholes were unfairly exploited for decades. These proposed increases stand on the shoulders of a rigged system where major capital improvements, preferential rents, and vacancy increases led to astronomically inflated rents, the rents that we have now. One more sentence. All 2 million rent-stabilized tenants need a rent rollback. Queens needs a rent rollback. And finally, I just want to say, I was a mayoral appointee in the previous administration. I know that the mayor is reaching out to you, asking you to vote for a rent increase. Please remember that your decisions will lead to people sleeping on the street. You don't need to listen. Vote for a rent rollback now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our next three speakers, thank you. Thank you. Our next three speakers will be Sarai Israel, Rosa Estrada, and Anthony Govine. Is Sarai Israel here? Thank you. And Rosa Estrada, or is that, is Miss, okay, good, thank you, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rosa, and we represent tenants from Elmhurst. We do not agree that rent and control apartments should be increased because we are retirement and dependent on social security as our income. In most cases, that is our only income. Some people live in their apartment for many years, and they do not want to move away from their community. This will cause them many problems. We need your help, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anthony Govine? Is Anthony here?
Let them know we're here.
Thank you. And while you're coming down, please, let me just announce our next three speakers. Yanette Ramirez, Yoshi Carrillo, and Leonardo Ruales. Thank you.
Raise the roof. You're supposed to protect us, okay? We talk nice to you. All y'all do is listen. You go home, you go to your boats, you go to your maids and everything else, and everything's cool, okay? But what about us? You look down on us. You're up there on the stage, okay? We're people, okay? We're live, we're real, we have feelings. And guess what? Raising the rent is criminal, especially when you don't have reasons to do it, okay? All this game that you got going on with the city, check to check, people becoming homeless, okay? It's criminal, okay? And y'all allow it to happen, okay? It can't happen anymore. You can't squeeze money out of a rock. People have to live. People have to be able to afford food, okay? While people are fighting, trying to survive, okay, you're looking over them from your rich mansions, okay? Do you enjoy watching people fight, okay, for survival, for their children, for their needs, okay? It's got to stop. And y'all are supposed to protect us. Don't look down on us. We are people.
Thank you. Thank you. Yanette Ramirez? Is Ms. Ramirez here? Do you need a hand with the microphone?
Good evening.
Can we get someone, sorry, to help with the microphone just so we can hear you? 1 second. Thank you. Oh.
No, I'm not. Oh, what's your name, ma'am? Sarah Israel.
Oh, yes, sorry, we didn't get you before, but thank you. Apologies. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for having this forum this evening. It's important to hear from all aspects of city life. As a disabled senior person residing in the boroughs, we are further impeded by the proposed increases. Whether we are disabled, elderly, can or cannot ever leave our home, or have a caregiver cannot be present to speak for us in regard to the financial stresses being placed on us for having to choose between food, medicine, so that the rent can be paid first. And if we have Section 8, we are being penalized not to be able to have SCREE or DREE eligibility. We are ineligible for these benefits, further eating into our benefits, our benefit checks, whatever they may be, the sources are, leaving us in housing for many that do not have handicap accessibility and no place to move to, as our incomes do not meet the guidelines of the minimum requirements of the Housing Connect line, which today is, in many cases, 6 figures. Therefore, many people are locked away, unseen, no one knows they're there. Loving home care aides carry the needed food to many people that no one ever sees. Increasing us even 2% is a hardship. We realize the cost increases, but the cost for the buildings are there, but the cost to us, the tenants, are also there.
Thank you.
The vacancy that they are able to increase by 30% more than covers their costs. yet they say they have empty coffers. I know of friends who are in other boroughs where they are taking in empty apartments, they're garaging apartments, and they're taking apartments, they're turning them to Airbnbs by the day, by the weekend, by the week, by the month, and no background checks, no credit checks.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Thank you.
And therefore, what they are doing is they're putting people at risk, the tenants at risk, for all kinds of things. We don't know if they're sex offenders, they're in the sex offender registry, criminal registry, nothing. So when
Thank
you
you.
go to vote, consider the people that you know and the people that are in this room are all at risk.
Thank
so
you.
you have to vote no to an increase.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yannette Ramirez.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yannette. I'm here today as a tenant whose parents live nearby, just a 15-minute walk from here. I'm also here today because I work for a nonprofit that has programs for Black trans people. My parents are 67 years old. Mis padres tienen 67 años y han trabajado acá por los últimos 22 años de su vida. They have worked here for the last 22 years of their life. I am not, at the moment, able to help them with the rent, but I do help them when I can with what I can. We're fortunate enough to be able to be healthy enough to work, but can you imagine still working past your retirement age? They plan to keep working for another 10 years, they tell me. But the rent alone takes half of their income. My parents don't have a rent-stabilized apartment. However, I am here so the folks who do have aren't pushed back into a worse situation like my parents are. I'm also thinking about how Black trans people are already at risk for homelessness, even if they manage to get a rent-stabilized apartment. This rent increase puts vulnerable communities at risk for homelessness and poverty. It doesn't make sense to raise the rent when you could be cutting budget from police, the military, other bloated, obscenely offensive departments. This is undemocratic and cruel. I want you to imagine a world where we don't have to worry about putting people out in the streets, but making sure they're housed, healthy, and able to contribute to their society under a safe roof over their head. Housing should not be for profit. Housing is a human right. You have to vote no on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yoshi Carrillo. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yoshi, born and raised in Jamaica, Queens, and a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. This does not add up. What doesn't? The fact that we have to ration our stagnant wages with rising inflation to even afford to exist in New York City, while greedy corporations, landlords, and politicians squeeze the working class dry as they profit off of our struggle. Workers should not have to prioritize whether they buy groceries or their medication. They should not have to prioritize if they pay their bills or their rents. New Yorkers should not be houseless when there are thousands of empty, rent-stabilized apartments that are being hoarded by real estate executives and landlords who lobby corrupt politicians like Mayor Eric Adams to raise rents, and in this case, up to 7%. It's clear from everybody that has testified in this building right now that this capitalist system does not work. What we need is radical socialist transformation where dignified housing is a guaranteed human right. That's right. Rent stabilization and rent control was fought for and won by movements led by working class people like us. And we will do it again and put an end to landlordism. Put an end to landlordism. Tax Wall Street to make and fund public housing programs and make the Rent Guidelines Board a democratically elected body by working class tenants. It's criminal that housing, a basic human need for survival, is treated as a commodity. 7% may seem minimal to y'all, but it's poor and working class New Yorkers who will have to face that burden when we're already facing inflation and over 30% of our income already goes towards rent. What we demand is a rent roll back, not a rent hike, because no one deserves to go to bed thinking that this may be their last night in their home. No one should go to bed in their car, in the subway, on a concrete sidewalk because they cannot afford their rent. Where are we supposed to go when you price us out? We're here to say that we will not be silenced, we will not be moved, and we will fight back.
Thank you. Thank you. Leonardo Ruales. Mr. Ruales, please.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Leonardo Ruales. Soy un inquilino acá en Queens y también soy maestro y parte del movimiento por el socialismo y la liberación. Y estamos acá por dos motivos. El primero es denunciar la corrupción de esta mesa de votación. Nosotros los residentes de Queens no elegimos a las personas que nos están representando.
Señor, pausa para la interpretación.
¿Lo tiene escrito?
Sí, sí, sí.
My name is Leonardo, and I'm part of the Party of Socialism and Liberation. And I'm a tenant and a teacher, and we're here for two reasons. The first one is because we are trying to denounce corruption of this board, and we are residents of Queens, and we haven't elected the people that are participating in this vote.
I'm gonna make this lower. Okay. Supuestamente nos representan, pero siempre dan carta blanca para que los caseros no suban las rentas.
Supposedly you represent us, but you always give carte blanche to landlords so that they can keep increasing the rent.
Y el segundo motivo es para decirles a los inquilinos que nosotros tenemos poder colectivo.
And the second reason is to let the tenants know that we have collective power.
Nosotros podemos cambiar el sistema, este sistema corrupto, no democrático que nos está perjudicando a todos y sube cada vez la renta y no podemos pagar.
We can change this system that's not democratic and this system that's always trying to increase the rent. We can actually have this go the opposite way.
Porque tenemos el derecho a tener una vivienda digna y no a tener que trabajar 2 trabajos, 8, 10, 12 horas al día para poder pagar las rentas, las facturas del gas y de servicios básicos.
We have the right to have dignified housing and also the right to not have to work 2 jobs, not have to work 8, 10, 12 hours just to make enough money to pay rent, utilities, food, and other things.
Y la realidad es que la vida en Nueva York está cada vez más invivible.
And the reality is that life in New York is every day getting more and more unlivable.
Con una inflación muy alta y los salarios básicos se mantienen en la miseria.
With high inflation and regular salaries that just basically have us in poverty.
Mientras que los caseros siguen explotando a sus inquilinos y llevándose más dinero a sus bolsillos.
All the while, landlords keep exploiting their tenants and keep filling up their pockets.
Casi 70,000 personas están durmiendo en la calle, 20,000 de ellas son niños y niñas, y como maestro me duele mucho ver todo eso cada día.
There's about 70,000 people that are homeless right now in the city, and about 20,000 of them are children, and that hurts me as a teacher to see that occurring.
El 60% de las personas sin techo son afroamericanas y el 30% latinos, y la realidad es que muchos de nosotros estamos a un paso del desalojo.
60% of homeless people are African American and 30% are Latinos. And honestly, it breaks my heart to think that we could all potentially be homeless.
Y tenemos personas muy allegadas a nosotros que han sido sacadas injustamente de sus hogares.
And we all have loved ones that we all know have been removed from their homes unfairly.
Y llegó la hora de decir basta. Compañeros y compañeras, tenemos que seguir organizándonos.
And we're done. It's time to say enough. Ladies and gentlemen here, we have to organize.
Para cambiar este sistema que nos sigue afectando y oprimiendo a todos.
To change this system that keeps affecting us and oppressing us.
No necesitamos más alzas en la renta, necesitamos un rent rollback.
We don't need rent increases, we need a rent rollback.
Porque los salarios no alcanzan, la inflación sigue subiendo. Sigamos luchando y organizándonos.
Because our salaries are not enough and inflation keeps going up. We need to get together and fight.
Y organizando por un sistema más justo para todos nosotros y nuestras comunidades.
We need to fight for a fair system for us and for our communities.
So let's keep fighting and organizing for something better for our communities and so we can get rent roll back and a better system.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our next three speakers will be Saba Munawar, Alba Inastria, and Abigail Jimenez. Is Saba here? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Saba Manawar, and I have rented majority of my adult life. 2 years ago, the only reason my husband and I were able to stay in New York was the opportunity to move into a rent-stabilized apartment. With 2 incomes, we still struggle, and I know my neighbors struggle even more as inflation rises and incomes do not. Living in a stabilized apartment in New York lets us live in a city we believe in and invest our time in and cherish. It lets us be closer to our parents and help care for them as they age. Queens has always been home. My father moved to Jamaica, Queens in 1974 from Pakistan. Queens has always been home for my family. An increase will drive New Yorkers to the edge in a city that's already housing burdened. The RGB was created to ensure housing would stay affordable, not protect landlord profits and push residents out. In my stabilized building, there are ghost apartments that are not rented out. Those 8+ apartments are always empty, at least one on each floor. It's time to make sure landlords bring all their apartments to the market and not hoard them. There needs to be accountability. They keep getting increases but do not hold up their end of the deal of putting apartments out there and keeping up with repairs. If rents go up in my community in Queens, it will lose its neighbors who have created a community that cares for one another, a community that banded together before the pandemic and even more during the pandemic. Many of my neighbors are on fixed incomes and deserve to age in dignity. The residents of New York City are committed to its city. It's time for the city to commit to them and not landlords. Tenants have always been squeezed left and right. I hope you will choose everyday New Yorkers over profits and choose not to increase rents after a huge raise last year. I hope you will actually roll back the rent. Housing is a human right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Alba Inastria. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Alba Inastria. My building burned down 2021. Prior to that, we had a rent increase 2019. The building had over 200 violations after the fire. There should have not been a reason for our rent to have been increased at that point, especially during the pandemic, which they didn't restabilize. My parents are seniors. We've been here for 40 years. They've worked. They've never asked, after our fire, after our apartment burned, we didn't even know where to go to get money for food. We didn't have any documents left. Everything stayed in the apartment. I was their essential person. My stepfather he's in a nursing home now, but I was their essential person during that time, during the pandemic, due to me not wanting them to get sick. So what I'm trying to say is that luckily I was there to be that for them, but most senior citizens do not have that luxury, right? For someone to help out with groceries, their rent, literally their Social Security goes towards the rent. So if I wasn't there to pitch in and to buy the groceries and to move back home with them, I don't know what they would be eating. They would have to be standing on food lines, and also it's why don't the landlords open up their books, right? Get an audit for all the landlords, because there should be no reason why the rent is going up and nothing is getting fixed in our buildings. It's cruel and it's absurd that everything goes towards these people that already have money and want to keep the working class families
Thank you.
with a foot on their neck struggling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Abigail Jimenez is next, and let me announce our next three speakers while Abigail Jimenez is joining us. Mahtab Khan, Jessica Cardenas, and Brian Fotino. Please. Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is Abigail Jimenez, and I'm a housing specialist and community organizer at Woodside on the Move. During my time at Woodside on the Move, I have assisted clients who are on a fixed income and struggle to pay for necessities such as food, clothing, utilities, and etc. Continued rent increases are not realistic for many who rely on a fixed income or even most of New Yorkers. According to the Coalition for the Homeless, in 2021, 53% of New York City renters are rent burdened, meaning they paid more than 30% of their incomes towards rent. Furthermore, 32% of New York City renters were severely rent burdened, which meant that they were paying more than half of their incomes for rent. It is said that the proposed increases are due to landlords facing dramatic increases in insurance rates, property taxes, and operating costs. However, tenants have been subjected to the same increases, if not more. New York City renters are faced with increased costs on essential items due to inflation, which have left many families struggling, but their wages still haven't increased. Unlike landlords, tenants do not have the luxury of having their incomes increase 3 to 7% every year or two. Landlords have been able to increase their profits as the housing market has been taken over by corporate landlords. Corporate landlords exist to extract the maximum amount of profits while tenants are left overburdened. It is why I'm here to implore you to support a rent rollback, and it's time we prioritize New York City renters and stop rent hikes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Cobb, please. Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mahtab Khan. I'm the son of Bangladeshi immigrants. I come from a working class family and am a tenant from here in Jamaica, Queens. We're all here tonight to come after work or even here instead of spending time with family and friends. Why? Because we are here to advocate for working class and low-income families all across New York City, and because the New York City Rent Guidelines Board won't do their job. The Rent Guidelines Board's responsibility is to ensure that rent remains affordable, not to protect the landlord's profits. By siding with landlords instead of tenants, you're all failing to do your job in advocating for tenants who rent, especially those struggling to make ends meet. True New Yorkers who lived here for years and are being priced out in not being able to afford to live here, don't worry about how this will hurt landlords, because I promise you, the landlords will be fine. They won't be broke. They will not become homeless. All right. What and who you should be worried about is the low-income and working-class people, maybe even working-class, middle-class families, New Yorkers being displaced. These are folks having to move out of New York City due to it being unaffordable, having to move to another state, or even folks being forced out of their homes to live on the streets because of how rent is increasing. The board members here siding with landlords would be promoting a culture of gentrification, rent skyrocketing, and the exploitation of their tenants, and allowing the wealthy to get richer. These are tenants who are trying to survive and make ends meet. You're worried about the wrong people. You should be worried about tenants, not the mayor's donors or real estate developers. You're okay with wealthy folks outside of New York to come here in New York and move here, while your own community members from New York are being forced out of their homes. Some folks are even at the brink of being evicted or becoming homeless because of how landlords and how those beholden to them are being able to manipulate the housing market. New York is unaffordable. There aren't any reasonable rent cap laws preventing landlords from exploiting their tenants.
Thank
Minimum
you.
wage has remained stagnant while the cost of living has increased due to inflation and rent skyrocketing as time passes. This has been an issue ongoing even during the pandemic. And I don't know how
Thank you.
many
We
of
have a
you on the
number of people
board
to hear from.
actually
Thank you.
check websites like Zillow or Trulia because of worrying about not being able to afford
Khan, thank
to
you.
live here in New York, but rent has gone up to unreasonable amounts. When you
Thank you.
vote on June 21st, I ask that you stand with tenants and please have a conscience, have a heart, and don't raise our rents. We can't
Thank you.
afford it. Your actions on the
Thank
board
you.
impact our lives as community members here, and please vote no to a rent increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Cardenas. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica. I was born and raised in Queens, New York, where I continue to reside as a rent-stabilized apartment for 41 years. I've seen the many changes in my neighborhood, including neighbors that were bribed to leave their homes of 30 years for $20,000 by their landlord. The new management in my building also tried to bribe me with shady methods since they took over 3 years ago and renovated the entire building except my apartment. During the renovations, my mother, 74 years old, and myself were exposed to many hazardous particles and mold infestation that spread all over the next door apartment. It took so much insisting to tell the new owner to seal the entrance door with Ziploc bags, install HEPA filters, and place us in a hotel or Airbnb. The owner had the nerve to get upset. Why? Oh, that's easy. They tried to get my mother and I frustrated to the point we left the apartment by making it unsafe and inhabitable. And having newly renovated building, and my new neighbors on the second floor had a huge leak in their bathroom that leaked all over my mother's bed since the bathrooms above are located above my mother's room. The cause of the leak was a nail in the pipe that construction workers carelessly installed within a few months of the renovation, creating mold within the walls. They didn't test for the mold since that leak was sitting within the walls for a few months and it was repaired within the next day without ventilating the walls. There are other violations in my apartment that require attention, such as self-closing door, no smoke detectors, lead still not handled since March. Meanwhile, I have a 2-year-old that visits more than 10 hours a week, and after so much insisting, the violations are still not handled. I was also overcharged for 3 months because the landlord did not submit a lease within the 30 days. Now I was forced to involve the DHCR HPD because of the lack of responsibility of the landlord and also the fact that they were intentionally misleading about the submitting a lease renewal when they didn't. Witnessing other neighbors' situation has caused mental, emotional, and physical stress, leading to many neighbors moving out, leading to rise of homelessness and mental distress because they can't afford the increased rent, food, MTA hiking the fares and utilities. Do you think that's justice? Do you think that's humane to allow these greedy, selfish capitalist owners to get a 7% of rent when they aren't following protocols? Do you think it's humane to work every day, all day, just to make ends meet? I work every day, Monday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Do you think I have a life? I have to survive. I just left work to come here to speak up for the people that couldn't come here. Do you think that's fair?
Thank you for your testimony.
No, I'm not finished. Because you, the Rent Guidelines Board, which is, you started in 1960 to help us and hear us from the tenant, and instead rent has risen. What are you doing to support us? I implore you to not increase the rent and roll back the rent.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me announce our next 3 speakers. We're going to be hearing from, thank you, from Brian Fotino, and then from Ergun Sherpa and Sandra Moran. And I just want to say that if anybody still would like to speak and hasn't registered, registration will close. It's out in the lobby. We'll close at 8 p.m. Thank you. So, Brian Fotino, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brian Fotino, and I am...
Sorry, Brian, I apologize.
No worries.
I'm so sorry. If we could translate my previous announcement, I apologize. So sorry.
No worries.
Thanks.
Okay, buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Señores, de nuevo, si alguien quisiera hablar o declarar algo o testificar aquí, entonces ustedes tienen hasta las 8 de la noche para inscribirse. Pueden salir a la mesa de afuera, inscribirse con las señoras ahí afuera para poder hablar. Muchas gracias.
And if you've pre-registered but haven't checked in, please make sure to do so. We want to make sure we hear from you.
Y también, si ustedes ya se inscribieron anteriormente para hablar y todavía no hemos llamado su nombre, por favor verifiquen afuera. Muchas gracias.
Many thanks. Thank you. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Brian Fotino. I am a tenant organizer at Catholic Migration Services and the Right to Counsel Coalition. I am standing here today representing rent-stabilized tenants in Queens who cannot afford another unconscionable rent hike. In particular, I wanted to share the story of the tenants I'm organizing at 4746 40th Street who are facing a proposed MCI increase in addition to the proposed Rent Guidelines Board increases. They're already being evicted, they don't have the necessary repairs, and they cannot afford another increase. It might seem like a small amount, but every dollar counts. My tenant, Christine Hizan, said that my parents immigrated to New York City in the 80s and raised me on a working class income. As an adult, I've seen the cost of living in NYC soar, and over 40% of my paycheck goes toward rent. Annual rent increases are making it harder to live in NYC, and I'm afraid I'll be priced out of the neighborhood where I grew up. And the statistics back this up. According to a Community Service Society survey, 23% of rent-stabilized tenants skipped meals or went hungry because there wasn't enough money to afford food. Have any of you skipped meals to pay your rent? 28% cut back on buying school supplies or clothes because of a lack of money. Have any of you had to cut back on buying school supplies for your children because your rent was too high? And 14% reported that their landlord threatened them with eviction, which is up from 6% last year. Are any of you being evicted? And I want to talk to you all directly for a second, to Robert, Alex, Andrew, Nestor, Christina, and Doug, because I want to know, how are you able to sleep at night knowing that you are going to be putting people out onto the streets and into the shelter system if you vote for another high rent increase? I don't think that's okay. I think we need to take a stance against that, and that's why we are here today. Fight, fight, fight. Housing is a human right. Fight, fight, fight. Housing is a human right.
Thank you. Thank you. Ergen Sherpa. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Orgin Sherpa, and I'm a rent-stabilized tenant for the last 20 plus years at 4070 Hampton Street in Elmhurst. We are at the end of COVID-19 pandemic. However, New Yorkers have not settled yet. The cost of New York is skyrocketing. Unfortunately, our income is not increasing in the same pattern. Tenants are usually responsible for electricity, cooking, gas, and internet in their apartments. And these prices all went up in the past year. Electricity cost, for example, rose 12.5% during 2022 and are experienced to rise another 5.7% this year. Gas bill went up 5% and are expected to rise another 4.6% this year. Also, most tenants are rent burdened in New York City, paying more than 30% of their income in the rent. Your decision to increase 7% rent will impact millions of New Yorkers, many of whom are struggling to remain in their homes, especially low-income New Yorkers. Building owners' income growing in every borough when we as tenants are struggling to financially balance our life. In my apartment, I need a new window screen at the moment. I haven't changed it for a long time because there is extra cost. you know that the rent is already too high. If landlords really need financial help, there are various programs available. Landlords just need to open their books.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Rent Guideline Board, please don't create any burden on tenants and be realistic.
Thank
A 7% rent increase will be an insane act. It will create a deep mess in the housing sector. RGB, please don't forget housing is a human right.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sandra Moran. Sandra Moran. Is Emma Cardoza here? Is Emma Cardoza here? There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Sí,
Please.
buenas noches. Mi nombre es Emma Cardoso. Yo vivo en 2818 de la 38 Avenida en Astoria, Queens. Nosotros ahorita estamos en un nivel que tenemos ya la corte y nosotros no podemos pagar ahorita la renta.
Good afternoon. My name is Ms. Cardosa, and I live in 2818 38th Avenue. Thank you. And right now, we're having an issue where we're not able to pay the rent.
Sí, nosotros ahorita estamos, ¿verdad?, en la corte. Nosotros no tenemos para pagar la renta.
Right now, we're
Por
in
lo
court.
de-
We're not able to pay the rent right now.
Por lo de la pandemia, ¿verdad?, que no trabajaron, no trabajó mi familia, mi esposo.
During the pandemic, because of the pandemic, we
Y
weren't working.
ahora-
My family wasn't working. My husband wasn't working.
Y ahora el problema es de que, ¿verdad?, nosotros estamos en la corte, mañana tenemos corte. Y a veces,
The problem is that we're in the court. Tomorrow we have court.
y a veces la gente, en vez de darnos apoyo, le dan apoyo más mejor a los propietarios, en vez de que nos den apoyo a nosotros, ¿verdad?
And at times,
Nosotros no tenemos...
the people, instead of supporting us, they give supports to the owners instead of supporting us.
También después nosotros vivimos en marzo, no tuvimos gas por 8 meses.
Also, when we were living during the time of March, we didn't have gas for around 8 months.
Y nosotros estuvimos comprando la comida afuera porque pues no podíamos cocinar en casa. Y eso fue demasiado dinero para que nosotros estuvimos comprando la comida. ¿Cómo nosotros le vamos a pagar la renta sin gas? Y ahora pues nosotros necesitamos que ustedes nos ayuden.
And we had to buy our food outside because we couldn't cook at home because because of the situation with no gas. So how we're going to pay the rent that way? We were spending too much money in paying for food. And now we need you guys to help us.
Y a veces los propietarios, ¿verdad?, tienen dinero para arreglar. Nosotros también tenemos condiciones que no las han arreglado.
And sometimes the owners also have money to make repairs. We have conditions that are not being fixed.
Y ellos, ¿cómo nos exigen a pagar la renta si ellos no quieren arreglar nada de lo que nosotros tenemos dañado?
And
Nosotros también tenemos...
How can they demand that we pay the rent when they don't want to fix the things that are damaged in our apartments?
Nosotros también tenemos derecho, como él y como nosotros tenemos derecho de que tener un hogar tranquilo. Nosotros también tenemos mucho acoso.
And we have a right, just like they do, we have a right to have a peaceful home. We're also facing a lot of harassment.
Ellos nos llegan, nos acosan, nos sacan fotos, de todo lo hacen. Entonces, ¿nosotros qué somos para ellos? Nos tratan como si fuéramos cualquier cosa.
And they also harass us, they take pictures of us, they do all kinds of things to us. So what are we for them?
Thank you.
Gracias y hasta aquí mi parte.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Our next three speakers, thank you. Our next three speakers are Zoila Muchicias, Amy Collado, and John Burek. Zoila Mucias? Okay. Amy Collado? Okay. Oh, Amy.
So I started writing down something, and as my community started talking some more, I figured, what's the use? I'm not going to hit you guys with a bunch of statistics that you are very well aware of. Because at the end of the day, you guys know. You know more than we do what's happening on the ground. You see these numbers. It's your profession to do that. We have to do the investigations on our own, but you guys know. And so I figured I'd use the next minute and 30 seconds to give you some examples of people on the ground. I actually work with those tenants. They've been on rent strike since 2020. As soon as their rent strike is over, they're already priced out. So they're terrified of this idea of the rents being raised even higher than what they can afford. Recently, I came across this woman, friend of a friend, who at the young age of 44 suffered a stroke, being a single mom, trying to make ends meet. She was in a coma for 2 months. And when she woke up to an eviction case and lots of rental arrears. So she's now 44 and she has disability that is less than $500 a month, and her rent is already $1,800. This is just an example of the things that are happening on the ground that we see every day, right? We understand, as everybody said here, we know landlords have money. Who don't have money is us, we the people. People who struggle all the time to make ends meet, to pay for the trains, right? The MTA is proposing another increase. Food is expensive. McDonald's is even expensive for some people, right? So I think what we're really trying to tell you is to see us, understand where we're coming from. We are not in the same boat as landlords. They have money that they can spend to do what's right, and they don't, and yet we're promising them more. What about everybody else? Where's our increases? Where's our rollbacks for food, for gas, right? Where's our jobs aren't increasing? We're not getting more money. And so we want you guys to see us and to hear us, because fighting at you doesn't work, being nice doesn't work. So we're honestly at our wit's end. And this is my 6th time testifying here. I'm sick of this process.
Thank you.
I'm sick of it because you guys know what it is. You know what we're experiencing. So do the right thing, stop being in landlords' pockets, and stand by the people. Thank you.
Thank you. John Burek? Is John Burek here? Okay, let me announce the next 3 speakers we have on our list. Antonia Martinez, Rosa Jimenez, and William Jourdain.
My name's John Burek.
Oh, thank you.
I live at 4328 47th Street. It's a Bronstein property-owned building. Bronstein happens to be one of the landlords that has a very poor reputation. The buildings are not maintained. We have a rat problem. I have cloth wiring. The building was built, I guess, somewhere around 1900. Nothing has been repaired. When I've asked the landlord to do repairs, what I've been told is, we'll do the repair, but we'll charge you an extra $300 in rent to upgrade the electricity. If I turn on an air conditioner and I turn on my microwave oven, it blows. Well, why do I have cloth wiring, which is a hazard, in the apartment? Now, you heard these people. What's wrong with you? Do you want to have a housing crisis? Do you want to have people homeless? I'm a New York City police officer who's retired, and I've got a $4,000 pension. All of you guys get more money than I do, and you're telling, and I have to get this increase, and I'm going to wind up homeless. After 25 years of protecting people like you in the street, how many cops, how many families are you going to just throw on the street? You're causing a housing crisis. Get out of the pockets of the landlords and start doing what you're supposed to do, which is protect tenants. Wake up and screw Eric Adams. I know he appointed you, but that doesn't mean that you work for him. You should be working for us. What the hell is wrong with you? Don't you look in the mirror? Don't you feel sorry for these people? You should be ashamed. If you vote this friggin' increase, I'm going to tell you something. You should all hang your heads in shame. And the other thing that I hate about this process, we can't vote you out because you were appointed. All of you were appointed. And I guarantee you, every one of you have a bank account over 100 grand. Unfortunately, we don't.
Thank you. Thank you. Antonia Martinez.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Antonia Martínez. Y,
Hello,
yo
good
estoy
evening.
con
My
la-
name is Ms. Martinez.
¿Perdón? Okay, I just want to remind you a very important thing. You guys have a moral responsibility. A very important thing. I want to remind you guys that you have a very important mission. You have a moral responsibility, bigger than what we have, but we still paying taxes. I think you guys have a salary, and that comes also part of it from our taxes too. So we pay taxes, we work so hard. Why do you think this room is not full? Because there is hard-working people working. They cannot leave their jobs. We leave our jobs, but we are representing them. One more thing, it's a shame that New York, the capital of the world, have a lot of homeless people. Why don't you guys study? I mean, you guys have the time. We don't have time because we have to work. Why don't you guys study the system in Finland? They finish the homeless people on their streets. They helping. They have a good system. Why don't we study what they did good? We need to stop raising the rents for the people who is working high class working, because we have kids, we have other responsibilities. It's not your fault, maybe you're gonna say, maybe you would forget all this what we're saying here right now, you're gonna go home and sleep nicely, comfortable on your nice house. But we have leaks, we have mice, roaches, and landlords don't care. Why we should care to pay them more money? Tell them, push them to open the books. We already finished with one pandemic, the COVID, so now we're facing another pandemic. Please, guys, feel this in your soul. Do this for for our people, our good people. Please have this in your soul. Pray to do the right. Choose the right, always. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to take anything with us. In this life, it's just one life. We're going to go fast, and we're not going to take anything. Not even a paper, not even nothing. So think about it, please.
Thank you.
Something, remind that you have to do the right thing.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you. Rosa Jimenez.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Rosa Jiménez.
Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Rosa Jimenez.
Vivo en el 2818 de la 38 Avenida.
I live in 2818 38th Avenue.
Nosotros hemos sufrido mucho acoso por el dueño y sus trabajadores.
We've suffered a lot of harassment by the owner and his workers.
Nos han sacado fotos, nos toman el tiempo de salida y de entrada, a dónde vamos.
They have
Y
taken they have taken pictures of us. They note down what time we leave, what time we come back, and where we're going.
Y también sufrimos 8 meses sin tener gas.
We also suffered 8 months with no gas.
El dueño no quería arreglar y no ha querido arreglar. Tenemos muchos daños en el apartamento que él no quiere arreglar.
The owner doesn't want to make repairs, and he hasn't wanted to make repairs. We have a lot of damages in the apartment that he hasn't wanted to repair.
Siempre dice que va a arreglar, va a inspeccionar a cada rato que él quiere y no arregla nada.
He always says that he's going to make repairs and that he's going to inspect all the time, and he never fixes anything.
También le pedimos que nos descuente de lo que no tuvimos gas y solo nos ofrece un 5%. Eso no es nada, porque nosotros gastamos mucho dinero para la comida.
We also ask him to discount the amount of time that we didn't have gas, and he only offers a 5%, which is nothing, because we spent a lot of money buying food.
Eso no es justo lo que hace el dueño con nosotros. Queremos justicia.
It's not fair what the landlord is doing to us. We want justice.
Merecemos algo mejor, porque nosotros siempre hemos pagado la renta y él nunca ha hecho nada por nosotros.
We deserve something better because we've always paid the rent and he's never done anything for us.
Queremos justicia, por favor. Nosotros necesitamos, como él necesita su pago, nosotros también necesitamos lo mejor en nuestros apartamentos y que nos respeten.
We want justice because just as he wants his payments, we also want to live in a better situation and to receive respect.
Por favor, escúchenos. Y si el dueño llega esto a sus oídos, es mucho mejor. Quisiera decírselo de frente, pero si se puede algún día se lo diré. Muchas gracias.
Please listen to us, and if the owner can hear us, it would be even better. I wish I could say it to his face. Maybe in the future I'll be able to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. William Jourdain. And while Mr. Jourdain is coming down, our next 3 speakers will be Sam Lee, Julianne Williams, and Allison Dasher. Thank you.
Good evening, board. My name is William Jourdain, and I am the executive director for Woodside and the Move. Let me start off by saying, first and foremost, you're not the enemy here, in my opinion, because inherently the problem is you're appointed, you're not elected. And so we're talking about an institutional problem within our system where you're all up there making decisions that drastically affect people that you're probably disconnected with. But I can't say that for every one of y'all because I don't know who you are. But here's the reality. Woodside and the Move is one community-based organization in New York City with countless other organizations, including CHAYA, Catholic Migration Services, that are all here supporting essentially the same folks who are struggling every single day. Last year alone, this organization, Woodside and the Move, supported over 2,100 clients with 2 working housing case managers. What we're talking about is an issue where over 80% of those individuals are seniors living in a fixed income. I myself grew up right down the block. When I grew up in this community, I had my uncle around the block, I had my aunt and another uncle in the same building, my grandmother in the same building, and the reality is, right now, none of us are in that building anymore. The rent has gone drastically high, and at this point, we have to find a better solution because increases are not supporting every one of these individuals that are here right now. And so what is the real solution? We know that tenants cannot afford to pay more than 50% of their income on rent. We know, historically speaking, tenants have always paid only about 1/3 of their income on rent. Let's get back to real solutions. Let's not increase the rent. The proposal is astronomical, and we have to do better. And I think you all know and understand this. Please do the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Sam Lee. Is Sam Lee here? Sam, please, you're next on our queue. Thank you. Okay. And just a reminder, and let's get translation on this, just a reminder that the registration will be closing at 8 p.m., so in about 15 minutes.
De nuevo, les recuerdo, si quisiera hablar, ustedes tienen hasta las 8 de la noche para inscribirse. Pueden salir afuera a la mesa a inscribirse si quisieran hablar o declarar algo aquí. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will be very brief. My name is Julian Williams, and I'm a tenant. I applaud all of you tenants who are here this afternoon, as I also represent the tenants of Lefrak City. I'm the Tenants Association president. I have done my research, and there are no words to express tonight how I feel as a tenant myself and the atrocities that the tenants are going through, because it's a fact. The rent is too high. It's really too high. I also understand that everyone is facing increases, including landlords. But tonight, I'm standing here as a human being. I'm standing here as a child of God. You have a conscience. Please, I'm appealing to you. Help the tenants, even for one time in your life. The tenants need a rollback. We don't need an increase. The rent is too damn high. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Hello, my name is Sam. I'm with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I grew up in Queens for 29 years, and the state of the city is in crisis. When I came here, when I came to Woodside, lived in Woodside for college, my first apartment had a hole in the wall that I can see the street. At the time, my landlord's solution was to stuff that wall with blankets and insulation. During the winter, every night, I have to sleep with a jacket on and hope I don't freeze to death. My roommate at the time, Samira, was a single mom who immigrated from Venezuela. He has a son. His name is Isaac. He was 2 years old, and his first words were mucho frio. His first words was, I am very cold. This year, the New York City Comptroller reported that over 1,000 buildings with chronic lack of heat over the last 5 years. The city has failed to report and enforce action on 25% of those buildings. Every year, rent go up, inflation go up. We have to make decisions on whether we can keep a roof over our head, whether we keep warm, whether we can put food on the table for our children. And then the landlords have the audacity to continue to increase rent and to increase their profits, while children, their first words in this city are mucho frio. They are too cold, they are starving, and we have to end this now. The poor and working class here are paying over 52% of their income to their rent. Every year, I see students, business owners, nurses, teachers, friends, domestic workers, restaurant workers, they're all moving out of the city because they cannot afford to live here. They cannot keep their children warm. They cannot keep their children fed here, and it needs to stop, and it needs to be fair and just. It needs to be democratic. It needs to be elected people who make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Allison Dasher. Thank you. And while Ms. Dasher is coming up, our next three speakers are Anna Baker-Hearns, Anna Garzaro, and Jerry Kahn. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I originally didn't plan to speak. I came out of frustration because I moved back to New York City from Maryland. And because I just didn't feel like dealing with vermin, I moved into this apartment across here, considered a luxury apartment, 15211 89th Avenue. Promises of a pool and roof deck, and just a lot of promises that have not been kept. Nonetheless, I'm paying $2,700 a month. My income puts me, I guess, in an upper bracket. Nonetheless, by the time I finish buying food, paying taxes, paying $333 to park because I don't feel like moving the car from one side of the street to the other every day on 89th Avenue, there is not a whole lot left. And I hear a lot of talk, and righteously so, when your income can't meet the demands of your life. I feel for these people, and that's the only reason I got up. I feel for myself because my rent, with the 3.25% increase that you guys voted in last year, because of that, my rent has gone up almost $90 a month, right? I can't imagine what other people go through when I am looking at the fact that food has gone up, the MTA is looking to go up, trying to get an Uber is practically doubled. The lifestyle in New York City is tough. For you to just continue to raise rents every year rather than trying to keep things stable for folks who can't eat is an abomination. You really do need to do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Baker Hearns, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Baker Haynes. I'm a recent college graduate. I work full-time as a tenant organizer. I am a tenant, and I can't afford my rent. Professor Schwartz, you were my professor of housing policy at the New School. I am grateful for your class. It helped me get the job I have today, and it made me an even fiercer advocate of housing justice. You know what you taught me in your class? That any person who pays 30% or more of their income towards rent is considered rent burdened. You also taught me that even if a person is paying 30% or less, you have to look at their income. A person who makes $18,000 a year, which many New Yorkers do, have a lot less left after 30% of their income than someone making $55K or $100K. You taught me that these financial realities often result in housing insecurity because people are forced to choose between food, healthcare, clothing, rent, and other basic needs. Rent Guidelines Board, why would you want more New Yorkers to have to make these hard choices? That is the choice you are forcing upon tenants if you raise rent. As a tenant organizer, let me tell you what I see every day. Apartments that have not been repaired in over 5 years, tenants spending hours of their week fighting to get heat and hot water, buildings infested with rats and roaches, full of unaddressed mold that makes tenants sick. I got a text while I was sitting here from a mother of a 5-year-old that had 3 dead rats on her kitchen floor. In what other industry are you allowed to do such a terrible job and get a raise? Even with all of these conditions, the tenants I organize with are working 2, 3, 4 jobs to make rent for these unsafe apartments. With the stories you are hearing in this room, how dare you justify asking people to pay more? Respectfully, Professor Schwartz, please practice what you taught me and get us a rent rollback. And Rent Guidelines Board, do not raise the rent. We need a rent rollback. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anna, thank you. Anna Garzaro. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Anna Garzaro. I'm from the Move, which I'm the Move. We are here because we need your help. We need you guys to have a heart and help us to survive in this hard situation. I am a single parent. I've been living here in this country for 45 years. I raised my kids, 2 boys, by myself. They couldn't finish college because I couldn't afford to pay for them. Of course, I want them to have a different kind of life, like you guys who are over there. I want them to be something better than whatever I was. I live by myself now. The landlord is, I used to live with my kid, but he has to move. He's going to have a baby, so they cannot help me, And the landlord, I pay $1,800 now, and he said by July, next month, if I don't pay the $2,500 that he's asking me to pay for the apartment, he's going to evict me. He's going to take me out. I'm going to become a homeless. I've been applying in all different places to seniors for everything to get help. All I am is in a list for 2 to 5 years to wait. And in the meantime, what am I going to do? I'm disabled. I'm a senior, and I can do nothing. And the only help, the only hope that we tenants have is you guys to help us, please, to make this life a little better for us because it's too much. Everything is too high. When we go to the supermarket, we spend $200 for only 2-3 bags of food. We can eat only for 1 week, and then we have to get more money for the next week. If I pay electricity, I cannot pay the other utilities because I have no money. I have no big income like you guys do. I wish I had. But we are here because we need that you guys, please, be more firm with the landlords and make sure that you're helping us, not them, because they have money. They can pay you more, but we need the help. You guys are there because people put you there. We need your help. Please, help us because we need to survive as decent people that we are. We all work. We are looking for help. Please, do something for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Jerry Can. Thank you. Jerry Khan. Is Mr. Khan here? Here we go.
Hi,
Thank
my
you.
name's Jerry Kahn, and I live in Astoria, Queens. And thanks to, I'm sorry, I'm a little tired, and I'm trying to organize my thoughts. I have so much to say, but I can say it really fast. Folks, what I think you ought to consider, well, let me tell you really quickly. I once ran for city council. I've never won. I've never come close to winning, but I did run, and what I did was I caught my opponent, who was elected, breaking the conflict of interest law. Now, this is something that he's supposed to obey. He's not supposed to have special deals with banks or companies inside New York City. That's just not allowed. And yet, I filed a complaint with these folks, and nothing happened. In fact, I called up a few months later and said, what's the progress with my case with, I won't tell you who, but anyway, a man who was the, what? They did more than cover it up. The law covers it up. The law covers it up. And that's what I'm saying. I think we have to look right at the law. What we need to do is actually, imagine instead of a couple hundred folks here in Queens once a year, telling the board, this is what we want. Instead of doing that, let's have hundreds of thousands of tenants all over this city saying, we've had it. We're not going to come begging you for a rent rollback. We're going to demand a rent rollback from the people who run this town. That's what it's all about. Now, I'm not saying that that's easy, but what I'm saying is what I did was I filed that complaint. Sure, it didn't go anywhere, but it probably shook him up a little bit. And if we were to take this kind of action with powerful people all over the city, rich, powerful people all over the city, we'd get some results. And so let's aim higher. Rent rollback right now, but next year, more organizing to have an end to this business of begging these folks, having them elected, not appointed, and having the whole system changed. The whole system changed to serve you, not to serve the landlords and not to serve these folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Sujoy Krishna Bomik. Suja, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shujoy, as he mentioned. It's my first time being part of a RGB, and I'm from Chaya. I actually had my very fresh 90-day evaluation of being a tenant counselor. I'm 25 years old, and I sound very young. Just looking at the crowd feels very exciting and at the same time very nervous. But today I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about a tenant that I met literally today, 10:30 a.m. at the Chaya office in Jackson Heights. She speaks Gregorian. She's a 74 years old, elderly, gentle lady. She came to me and she sat on the chair and told me that she does not want to live anymore. And the reason is that she cannot afford to pay her rent, right? She receives, Social Security income, stays there by herself, and I really didn't know what to tell her, right? So I do see that as soon as all the folks over here, they are very motivated, they want to say, you Rent Guidelines Board, you guys should do this, should do that. But me, being a very fresh, young blood who wants to make a change in the world, please tell me, how do I do my job? How can I tell that person who cannot even afford to come to this meet over here with a $275 MTA ride can pay extra $25 every single month? Please tell me, how do I do my job?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next two speakers are Billy Floyer. Thank you, Billy Floyer, and Janet Gutierrez. Mr. Floyer, thank you.
Hola, ¿cómo están?
Hello, how are you?
Para empezar, quiero decir que lo voy a decir en español para escoger mis palabras claramente.
To begin, I'd like to say that I will be speaking in Spanish so that I can select my words carefully.
Y les quiero decir gracias por tomar su tiempo para estar aquí con nosotros.
I'd first like to thank all of you for taking the time to be here with us tonight.
Okay. Ustedes ya saben lo que van a hacer.
So you already know what you're going to do.
Y saben lo que es el correcto, lo que deben hacer.
And you know what the right thing is that you should do.
Entonces hay dos preguntas.
So there are two questions.
Son pendejos y si les vale ver.
Are you idiots or you don't care?
Thank you. Thank you. Janet Gutierrez.
Janet Gutierrez.
Janet.
Janet Gutierrez.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janet Gutierrez. I was born and raised in Queens, New York. So I feel that you really shouldn't raise the rent at all. Do you really want everyone here in this room to be homeless? I'm asking you that question. In your heart, do you want everyone here to be homeless? In my experience, I worked for over 3 years in the shelter system as a security officer. And I have seen just how dangerous it is, the way anyone can actually live in a shelter system. And I would never want to see anyone here to live in those conditions. I've almost gotten killed twice. And let me tell you, I would never want to see anyone here get killed. That's why you see so many homeless people on the street, because either they've been in the shelter system and they never even want to go back. Me, when I have my own free time and I'm able to spare a dime to someone or even buy them coffee in the wintertime or buy them food, I actually do it. So I do that. But I don't want to see anyone go in the shelter system at all. You raising the rent for everyone here in this room is gonna cause them a lot of stress, mental stress, and a lot of issues for them. Don't raise the rent for everyone here, because that's not gonna be good. I'm just telling you right now. We need a rental rollback. We really do. please do the right thing. When you go home, you don't even have to think about this. You have to do the right thing. When you go out in Jamaica and you see 3 homeless people, think about everybody in this room. You're basically putting everyone homeless. Their kids, their family, their parents, everyone. Do the right thing.
Thank you. We have one more speaker signed up, Carlos Ortiz. Is Mr. Ortiz here? Thank you.
Buenas noches. Buenas noches, mi gente.
Good evening everyone.
Como ustedes saben, yo trabajo con la organización Servicios Católicos de Migración.
As all of you know, I work with Catholic Immigration Services.
Con gente desde Sunnyside, Woodside, pasando por Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, Corona, hasta acá, hasta Jamaica, Flushing, ¿verdad? Todo
With
Queens.
people that live in several areas of Queens, Sunnyside, Woodside, Jamaica, among others.
En Nueva York hay más de 1 millón de apartamentos, más de 1 millón de familias que viven en apartamentos de renta estabilizada.
In New York, we have more than 1 million apartments and families living in rent-stabilized apartments.
Y 9 personas
And 9 people
que nosotros no escogemos,
who we do not choose,
por las que nosotros no votamos,
for whom we don't vote,
que son escogidas por una sola persona,
that are chosen by one single person,
el alcalde,
the mayor,
y esas 9 personas tienen en sus manos el destino de más de 1 millón de familias en la ciudad de Nueva
and
York.
those people hold in their hands the destiny of more than 1 million people in New York City.
¿A ustedes les parece democrático eso?
Do you believe that that is democratic?
Yo no les puedo decir a ustedes qué hacer con el sistema,
I can't tell any of you what to do with the system.
pero les puedo decir que si ustedes creen en la democracia y esto no les parece democrático,
But I can say that if you believe in democracy and this is not democracy,
son ustedes, somos nosotros todos los que tenemos el poder y la responsabilidad de cambiarlo.
it is you, it is all of us who have the right and the responsibility of changing all of this.
¿Cómo lo hacemos?
And how
No
do we do
basta
that?
hablar.
And how do we do that? Because it's not enough to just talk about it.
Nos organizamos,
We need to organize.
¿verdad? Desde Astoria hasta Flushing, hasta Jamaica, todo Queens, toda la ciudad de Nueva York.
Right.
Hay que reunirse con nuestros vecinos, hay
From
que traer
Astoria
inquilinos.
to Flushing to Jamaica, we need to work in tandem with all of our neighbors all over New York City
Hasta que tengamos un proceso que nos represente.
until we finally have a process that represents all of us fully.
Un proceso que entienda y que respete que no puede ser que tenemos, Amy tiene 6 años viniendo, yo tengo 5 años declarando.
A system that allows all of us to be represented.
I'll interpret myself, don't run the clock. Amy has been coming here for 6 years. I've been coming here testifying for 5. Many of you have been doing it for many, many years. We're all exhausted from this. Necesitamos un sistema que reconozca que un 1%, porque ellos no lo entienden, porque no lo han vivido.
We need a system that represents, because a 1%, of course, they have not lived through this. We have.
Yo no sé si alguno de ellos alguna vez se tuvo que saltar la barra de la MTA para poder montarse en el tren para ir al trabajo o a la universidad, como a mí me tocó hacerlo, cuando no tenemos ni siquiera $3 para montarnos en el tren.
I have no idea if any of you have had the experience of having to jump the turnstile to go to work, to go to college. I've had to do that, to not have $3 to get anywhere.
O estirar una bolsa de pan y una jarra de peanut butter, ¿verdad? En la universidad, porque no tenemos dinero para comprar comida.
Or to purchase a bag of bread and some peanut butter while I was in college, because I didn't have enough money to buy groceries or any food.
Esta gente se va a casa y se olvida de los muchos años, décadas, de cientos de miles de inquilinos testificando una y otra vez.
These people go home and completely forget, and they've done this for decades. They forget the hundreds of thousands of tenants that come here and testify before them.
To close, necesitamos un sistema que no ponga la carga en los millones de inquilinos de tener que probar que merecemos un techo una y otra vez.
To finish off, we need a system that doesn't burden millions of people to make them think or to prove that they deserve better, that they deserve a dignified or respectable home.
Que vengan los caseros aquí, los que necesitan ayuda, y abran sus libros y demuestren que ellos necesitan ayuda. ¿Cuántos los han abierto en los últimos 10 años? Menos de 5.
Have the landlords come here and show us what hardships they're going through. How many of them have come here in the last 10 years? 5?
Rent rollback y otro sistema. Gracias.
A rent rollback and a new system.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you very much for coming out on a Monday
Muchísimas
night.
gracias a todos por haber venido.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, sorry, please.
Yeah, as an RGB tenant who's also rent burdened and lives next to tenants who are, my neighbors have their ceiling falling every 3 months because of the water leaks, and they're living with mold and a bunch of roaches. So it is disgusting to me, disturbing to see all of you begging to keep your home. And we know that everything that you are saying is true because the data is clear, and I think we all seen the data. All the 9 of us have seen the data. And the tenant reps, we asked for a rent rollback of -1%, which is more than reasonable for the owners, and at least a maximum of 1% increase. Again, more than reasonable to the owners based on records of increases. So I do hope that my fellow members take that into consideration. I'm just taking this space now because I haven't talked to all of you. But I hope you take that into consideration because we are not required to follow we don't have to follow the preliminary vote ranges. And I think we can do the right thing. We don't have the power right now. The 9 of us don't have the power to change the system, to make it more democratic, but we have the power to take these testimonies into consideration. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hennessy. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you very much. Shame on you! Shame on you! Thank you. Shame on you!